Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts. Today comes from a suggestion from a listener. Let's get this person's little handle here because they deserve something here. I'll mention John Graham. He said, do an MK Ultra mind control episode, man. ? Now, what we've done is that on our normal show, we did a ton of episodes, and then we went back and just listened to them and realized that, we'd either advanced our opinion or the subject matter is just so, in the pocket that we decided to retire it so you wouldn't be listening to, like, yesterday's news, right? CNN doesn't air what today or what they broadcast 2 years ago. So we essentially wanted to keep everything up to date. And no one was going back and listening to the old episodes anyway, so it's no big deal. So we have done on the regular show called MK Ultra Radio an MK Ultra episode. But it's always sort of wispy and, loose in its details. So this is going to be a nice deep dive into this thing. The reason why the show is called MK Ultra is my name's Mark and my other buddy's name's Kyle. And it obviously sort of dovetails into sort of the theme of everything that's going on that we care about, right? Mind control. Now, MK is mind control acronym in German, Deutsch. Now, for some of you, you know all about mind control programs, you know about MK Ultra, and others, you have no clue. So for those of you who don't have a clue, you're in for a cool ride, I think, if you're into mysterious things that have happened in society. I have done, at times, extensive research into this whole thing, and I think it's probably been at least 5 years since I really dove into it. And interestingly enough, I've bumped into people at smoke shops and just walking around who've seen the things that I've seen. And it's interesting because other people, like, there's videos that were out there that are no longer available. One of them is Buzz Aldrin saying on live television on, I think, a New Mexico television channel. I'm sure the video exists somewhere, but I can't find it anywhere. But I mentioned at the beginning of my moon episode that he said, once we figure out how to get to the moon, it'll be a lot easier to get to Mars. A sentence that cannot be misconstrued into any other meaning. There's no other way to replace the noun of moon and make it make any sense, right? Once we get to the Antarctica, we'll know how to get to Mars? No. But I've seen it with my own eyes. I have plenty of friends that have seen that video, plenty of listeners that said they've seen the video, but we're all struggling to find it. And that's how they do what they do. Once we expose the smoking guns that slip through the cracks, they go and get rid of it because Google's the government and YouTube is owned by Google. Now, mind control. Mind control sort of goes way, way back, right? Anyone that could manipulate the minds of others has engaged in mind control. Sounds like a stupid reminder. Well, we know that people have figured out hypnotism a long, long time ago. Hundreds, if not thousands of years before it was ever recorded in any sort of, parlor trick show. We know that people have figured out that repetition is an amazing method of brainwashing someone, which is in the end mind control. But now, making someone believe something and making someone do something are two different things. One would be indoctrination and brainwashing, and the other one would be actively puppeting someone else. Almost live action, right? Do this, do that, do this, and you're just doing it and you don't know why. Now, we know that almost happens today, every single day. But it could be a method of making you actively do something, like get up and do something. I give you a trigger word and you get up and you simply do something and you don't know why. You bark like a dog. You quack like a duck. The hypnotists do it all the time. But another part of mind control, which is in the other episode called mind control, is someone putting an obtuse frequency on your body and making you feel a certain way, right? MK Ultra was an amazing, bizarre, evil little thing that they did in the 50s and 60s, probably starting it before that. Now, the way it's romanticized in history, the reason why I say this is we all have to be careful about where blame is placed, right? Those who commit crimes are the ones that need to obfuscate their criminality. And one of the classic ways to obfuscate anything is to revise history. Now, if you would have asked me 5 years ago what the truth of MKUltra program was, I would tell you the following. Nazis in Germany, those bad guys, they started all kinds of crazy experiments, and we have videos of like pouring acid on bodies and all kinds of weird electricity experiments where, you know, parents were tortured by being given a lever, and if they had to electrocute themselves, and if they pulled back the lever, it electrocuted their kid. And so they looked at the mental perseverance, or I guess you could say mental resilience of a parent to die for their child. That's the story anyway. Now, the story goes is that they began using torture to try and control the mind. And they had discovered that trauma has an amazing effect on the human body. But then what happened was they engaged in World War II. This is probably going on during their occupation of Europe. We take them over through conquering. We smuggle 1,200. Approximately 50% of them help develop NASA, and the other 50% help create MKUltra within the Central Intelligence Agency before it was called that. The MKUltra program, we're not sure exactly when it started. If you go look it up on Wikipedia, you're just hoping that that's the truth. But we're pretty sure it was predominantly active through all the years of the 50s. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that it was active clear up into the 70s. Perhaps changing quite a bit along the way, right? Now, the thing is that once the Nazis get here, anything that they do on our soil is our fault, right? So it doesn't matter where these guys came from once they walk onto our soil. Now, what's interesting is my story, even in 5 years ago, includes George Herbert Walker Bush. It also involves a guy named Senator Byrd, who I think has just passed away. It also involves, I believe, Mitt Romney's family, his father being involved, maybe even his grandfather or something. But here's what the program is all about. Here we go. They had discovered, well, let's put it this way. Let's back it up. They wanted to control a person in a way that they could tell a person what to do and they would do it. They wanted to control a person in a way that they could store information inside them and get it out whenever they needed it. And just like good old Zoolander, they wanted to create something called the Manchurian candidate, which I'm not sure if that came from the movie or what the deal is, but somehow this is a program that's installed inside of a human being, and it is activated through a trigger word. And once the individual hears the word, they enact the program, and mission accomplished. I'm going to give you 2 examples of where I think a Manchurian candidate has been used to murder people. At least, for real, right? So that was the goal. I am not sure how they serendipitously started this, but I'm sure it was a complete mistake. And this may have been more common knowledge just a few hundred years ago, because, if you think about it, the world used to be a lot more brutal. It used to be a lot more, well, at least we think, there's the wars and the battles were insane. Just think about the battle zones of the Civil War, and the fact that soldiers said, 60,000 men are dead on a field, and the place is running with blood. Like people were slipping in the mud due to the blood of human beings mixing with the soil. That's a brutal world, and that's like, 170 years ago? And pain has a lot to do with this. The human mind does not want to feel pain. Big surprise, right? Tony Robbins is a motivational speaker out there that if you guys haven't dabbled in him a little bit, I would say you're missing out. But as per my friends who are pretty official story writers in Hollywood, I guess he was educated in the CIA. And he learned a very basic thing about the way the mind works, and he went out and created a positive program, which is to say the following. If you can take everything in your life that is making you unhappy, regardless if you think it's positive today, and you truly map negativity on it, you have a true perception of negativity on it. Let's say that you are upset that you're heavy, but you love pie. What he will say is, through various techniques, is I'm going to make you love the idea of being thin and healthy. And I'm going to make you being heavy, which is really making you unhappy, attached to that pie. And once I convince you what's positive and what's negative and give you a vision of your future, we don't have to do anything after that. Your mind will automatically gravitate away from things that make you heavy and gravitate towards things that make you healthy. And so there are all kinds of beautiful mechanisms in the mind that automatically do things. Just like, when you walk, you don't think about all the muscles. When I smile, I don't think about, 13 to 30 muscles that make me smile, right? So MK Ultra was based on the principle of compartmentalization of the mind, whereby we do not allow negativity to fester within us. We're always trying to push towards a loving nature of the universe, which should give you a little bit of a clue of what we're made out of and what the universe is made out of, right? But what they do to compartmentalize the mind, to give you an example, is that they would torture someone. They torture someone, obviously relative to what this person thinks is torture, physically torturing them. And I will say to you that a lot of the methodologies that they used was rape. And a lot of the subjects were obviously women. They would rape women. And during the rape process, and this is where George Herbert Walker Bush is accused, this is where Senator Byrd is accused, because they were allowed to have people in the program and you could just go in and rape somebody. I always thought George Herbert Walker Bush liked men, but whatever. You rape, and you tell them something, a code, a number, a zip code, a phone number, a fact. And then right after you get done torturing them, you treat them to the most amazing lifestyle they've ever had in their life. If it's a woman, you then put her through some spa to clean up her body. You give her a $10,000 dress. You load her up with jewelry. You get her hair done. You get her makeup done. You treat her with unbelievable respect when you address her. You surround her with maids and butlers and chauffeurs. You take her to parties. Have your picture taken with them. And there's a woman named Cathy O'Brien with a C, who was one of the subjects who was absolutely, I think, officially blown the doors off of MK Ultra. But she's largely ignored. This whole thing is largely ignored. Her boyfriend was, I believe, a CIA agent that broke her out because he fell in love with her. His name's Mark. But Cathy O'Brien had something very interesting because she had photographs of herself with these individuals. But now here's the way the thing works. So before she's raped, and then she's treated all this incredible attention, complete opposite. And from what I understand, she gets about 90% like royalty treatment and 10% full-on disgusting torture rape. But what they had figured out, and this is per Cathy's own testimony, there's tons of videos with her, some very incredible things I'm going to tell you about here in a second, but they're on video that you won't believe me when I tell you, but you're all going to rush out and look at it. Made you look. All right. Let's say they torture her in January. Maybe I don't know if it's one torture. I don't know if they rape her for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And then they treat her like gold, and they fly her, literally jet set her all over the planet. She goes everywhere that you and I would love to go. Spend millions of dollars on this woman. 6 months goes by. She sort of completely forgets that it ever happened, that the rape ever happened, because the mind wants to compartmentalize away the negativity of our captors, right? This is a little tiny tidbit of how Stockholm Syndrome works. But then 6 months later, when she least expects it, someone comes in and rapes her. And I can only imagine it's not lovemaking. I don't know the details about how the sex works, but I would imagine that just having someone sleep with you isn't going to make you feel negative, right? You would feel like a prostitute at best, But something happens whereby this sex is probably painful, probably terrifying. And then they do a little trick, which I'm sure that whenever this first happened, it blew someone's mind, and then they got addicted to doing this. But they'll go, what's the code? What's the code? What's the phone number? What's the message? And when she was being treated well for 6 months, they probably asked her the same question, and she didn't have any recollection. This is her testimony is actually to this effect. But during rape, she recalls the number. She recalls exactly the compartment of which was the last time that she was raped. So imagine like a virtual reality where you're in a world, and when you're raped, when you're tortured, whatever it is, it has 6 walls and a certain lighting quality to it. There's a certain amount of information flowing around the room. Maybe there's even Beethoven playing or something in case someone wants to torture you. That's just a reference to Clockwork Orange. Beethoven's awesome. But anyway, next, they wait 7 months to do it again. And no matter where you are physically in the world, you envision all the circumstances of the room when you were raped the first time. And here comes all this information. So that's the first step of compartmentalization. Now, some of you might go, well, that's all hard to believe, yada, yada. Cathy O'Brien is from what I understand, the daughter of a man who essentially gave his children up to foster care because he was caught having sex with all of his kids. And she was one of them. Per her own testimony, and there's some conclusive stuff with this woman. One, her boyfriend's employment record, for one. But her father got her pregnant, too. What she said was that the way that the government gets an infinite amount of bodies to do this, living beings, of course, is through the foster care programs. Now, for any of you who have studied the kids that disappear in foster programs, utterly disappear off the face of the planet, you will probably have run into articles where Jeb Bush is the governor. The state of Florida actually has been caught losing nearly 1,000 kids. The number might be over 1,000 at this point. I know what you might be thinking. Well, they're runaways. They're 15 and up, 14 and up, and they just run away. And you'll probably be right for a certain amount of these folks. But I believe the article that I read that went around the world like 10 years ago, or 5 years ago even, was that they had lost nearly 1,000, 10 and unders. And so Cathy O'Brien was saying that she was given to the government from a foster program after her father was caught ancestrally raping her. And her daughter was also put into the program. And because when you're born into the program, no one knows that you exist, right? In our world, if you're not given a birth certificate with your name in all caps, if you're not given a birth certificate in all caps, then you don't exist officially. Your person doesn't exist on top of your actual human nature, right? Your straw man doesn't exist. So her daughter was put in the program and declared mentally insane because they tortured her from the second that she was conscious. Now, Cathy O'Brien said that it went from this raping, torturing thing down to bombarding the mind with sound waves. So they would essentially, instead of giving you shock therapy, they would put headsets on you and bombard you with sound. And the sound would just electrically put you in a compartment because it was very uncomfortable. And I'm not thinking it's like deafening noise. I just think it's a certain tone that absolutely modulates your brain. You know, could be talking right to your pineal gland. Who knows, right? By carving out a frequency that matches the ohm, right? But once you open the door, they can put information in there, stop that sound, let you have a normal life, and then they can get it out of you when that sound occurs. Now, the thing is that no one really needs human beings, right, to memorize codes like that. I mean, it is sort of interesting in a digital age that you could give codes to human beings and then use human beings as almost the surrogate hard drives, right? But I really don't think that that's what this was all about. This was merely an evolution of the MKUltra program. Because at one point, they used this compartmentalization to reduce a human being to a non-empathetic reptilian being that would be willing to sort of drunkenly complete a program, a physical action. So it was stage one. They just simply tortured a person and gave them information, treated them great. They forgot the information, torture them again, the information comes back, right? With the Manchurian candidate, of course, none of us exactly know how they do this, right? But there are two. We have, initially, Jack Ruby that shoots Lee Harvey Oswald. Complete setup, right? I mean, you look at it today and it's just a big joke. But then you have a gentleman named Sirhan, who was accused of shooting Bobby Kennedy, also known as RFK, Robert Kennedy. They both have very interesting, similar testimonies in the hospital or the holding rooms after they had done what they had done. Now, for those of you who are very familiar with Jack Ruby and the association with JFK, you might refute a bit of that particular association, but go back and take a look at the hospital interview with this guy. Because Jack Ruby was a TNA guy for the White Knights of the Midwest, which was the secret society, the Scottish Mason secret society that LBJ was in. It's no mystery. There's books dedicated to these guys. They use the name to describe themselves. Now, I think most of you should know by now that LBJ was the central kingpin in setting up the assassination of JFK. There are tons of factions that were cooperating, contributing, and thumbing up this whole thing. And most namely, the bankers of Europe that essentially gave permission for this to occur. But obviously, if you're going to blame a patsy that can talk and who is very articulate, very talented, and very smart, which is Lee Harvey Oswald, you have to kill him to silence him, because dead men tell no tales, right? As the old park ride says, right? So Jack Ruby owned a lot of strip clubs, and it was said that he was very verbal about not liking the Kennedys. So it was a bit of a mystery why he would shoot a person that killed a person that he doesn't like. Of course, his outward press coverage was that he really loved the Kennedys and he was shooting Lee Harvey Oswald because he was just, satisfying the rage of everyone in the world. Now again, Lee Harvey Oswald was not given a trial. Let's not forget that. It's 1963 and he was guilty by association. He was guilty by accusation. This justice system that we're so proud of in the United States did not function for him at all. They led him right out in the open. It could have, if it wasn't Jack Ruby, it could have been 100 other people. And quite frankly, I can't believe they didn't try just to put him out there for some random person to hit Oswald. But they wanted him dead fast because he was already saying, I'm a patsy, the second they picked him up. What happens, though? Jack Ruby, who they said was, terminally ill with some cancer, stomach cancer, something like that, comes out of nowhere, shoots him in the gut. The famous picture of Oswald getting killed, getting murdered. And then that's pretty much all most Americans hear. They hear the cover story that Jack Ruby loved Kennedy, which is a complete lie. But if you listen to the audio interview, I don't know if there's video. I've only heard the audio interview of Jack Ruby talking about his experience. He said, what was really weird was I was driving by the police station, and he goes, I just felt an amazing need to turn into the police station. And he goes, I don't remember anything else until I woke up here. And I don't know why Jack, I'm assuming he was in the hospital. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but he's doing this interview because Sirhan was doing his interview from jail. But he doesn't remember the moment, which I think is very interesting. There was another moment in the last 5 years where this woman said she was driving by the White House. And I believe there's a video of her, almost, trying to drive her car towards one of the gates or something. And, everyone's trying to stop her. And I thought it was interesting that a Manchurian candidate typically needs a keyword to do what they do, to start it off. And if you think about a car radio is an interesting way just to play the keyword right into someone's mind. There's no evidence of that, but I thought that was interesting. She did something weird in the car as well. But now let's fast forward to RFK so that we can compare Sirhan to Jack Ruby. Now, for those of you who don't know who RFK is, he was the brother of JFK. He was the Kennedys are extremely brilliant people. And John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy were two very astute, amazing individuals who partook of life. And, when you partake of life on a level that they take it, you get to get over a lot of your lusts a lot sooner than most of us, right? So if like, for instance, there's a lot of young guys out there right now that are still dreaming about being with that beautiful girl, or having that really cool car, or being on the lake and having the girl in the car and all these things, right? Well, the Kennedys grew up handsome, wealthy, because of their dad moving moonshine, which was oddly skipped in the Boardwalk Empire series. Kennedys are utterly famous for moving moonshine and liquor during Prohibition. But the nice thing is these guys had reached a level of status with a very good mind, And so Robert knew that his brother was murdered, not by Lee Harvey Oswald, but he also knew that if he were to come up with that and say that he would potentially be murdered by the same folks. Now, he was murdered by the same folks, but he was trying to play it cool. And I believe it's 1968, he gives a speech for the DNC, Democratic National Party, at some local, and it wasn't, sorry, I'm not sure if it was the speech, but it was some campaign stomp speech, right? And it looks like he's just got it, man. He's going to be the next president of the United States in 1968. And you have a few different forces that killed his brother that can't have that occur. One, you have LBJ rewarding the bankers for allowing him to kill his running mate so he can become president, something his ego needed, right? Starting Vietnam War. And Vietnam War was his concession back to the bankers to say, I will borrow money from you in the name of my country so that I can be president at whatever interest rates you want. Right? And that's how he got the permission to do what he was doing. Plus, of course, they didn't like Castro pulling a trick on the State Department. And there's the mobsters of the world were getting attacked by RFK actually during his brother's campaign, but it was all set up by the CIA to take over the drug trade from the mafia, from the Italian mafia. So there's just some really wild blood going around when JFK was murdered. But for those of you who don't know about the assassination of RFK, here's how it goes. He gave his speech at a beautiful hotel, which name escapes me, but he was being toured through the hotel kitchen, which I believe they were trying to transfer him perhaps to his car or something. I'm not sure where they were taking him. But you have a gigantic kitchen, like a big industrial kitchen. And the hotel manager / guy who runs the place is escorting Robert F. Kennedy through the kitchen. And he is, because the room is so packed with people and press and stuff, this is before we realized we needed to protect people, he has his left hand on RFK's right hand, wrist. And he's just gently pulling him through there, just so they don't lose each other. Now, off to the hotel manager's right is a guy named Sirhan, which obviously just a foreign name. Automatically for some Americans, they go, well, of course, it's some communist sympathizer or something, right? Holding Sirhan's hand is a Caucasian girl in I think a white polka dotted dress. If it's not white, it's pink, but I think it was white. And she's holding his hand. Now, the official story is that Sirhan walked up to RFK and shot him. And then that's it. The truth of the matter is that you have probably 3 to 4 feet between RFK and Sirhan, because there's a man standing between them. Sirhan pulls the gun out and starts firing willy-nilly at the ceiling, at the wall. Nothing strategic about it. He's not pointing it at RFK's face. And this is per the eyes of the man who very quickly, I think he's a war vet, he grabbed Sirhan's wrist with the gun in it. And just instinctively, and I think this guy's pretty darn big, but just instinctively, he's got his hand, and there's one of those stainless steel tables that you find in industrial kitchens. He starts slamming Sirhan's wrist into this table to knock the gun out of his hand, which is why the bullets are going up and down, up and down. Now, technically speaking, he would have had to have shot through the hotel manager to hit RFK. But then Robert Kennedy drops. The girl that was holding Sirhan's hand runs out to the right and exits out a door out of the right of the hotel, down a little fire escape, which is only like half a story high. So it wasn't like the New York ones where we go down ladders. It's just a stair-stepping thing. People see this girl, and she's saying, "We did it. He's dead. We shot him." And people are asking her, who's dead? And she goes, "Robert Kennedy." And she is so excited, is what they said. She then gets in a car that's waiting and takes off. Now let's go back in the kitchen and rewind some time here. Robert Kennedy died of a shot behind his right ear. The shot that shot into his skull from the back of his right ear was within 3 inches of the barrel. We know this because the fireball that came out of the chamber of the gun singed his skin in a nice round flash mark. Robert Kennedy did not die instantaneously as a result of this shot. But now the ballistics people come in after the whole thing's over, because Robert Kennedy does bleed out, and they said, well, the shot that went into Robert Kennedy's head is the same caliber of the gun that Sirhan brought into the kitchen. So case closed, right? Now, the other thing was that there was rounds completely across the kitchen into the door jamb. There was a bunch of shots in the ceiling by Sirhan. So there's perfect ballistic evidence in the room that there was more than one gunman, and that Sirhan did not shoot anywhere near Robert Kennedy's vicinity, plus the eyewitness testimony of this hotel manager who grabbed his hand. So it took a few years. It took about, 5 years, from 68 to 73, and someone did an amazing documentary on YouTube. And I believe Alex Jones used to have this on his website at Infowars.com under the video tab, but his site's so much different now from when he initially launched it, so I don't know if you can find this. But they have the interviews with this hotel manager. And I believe it's the same documentary that interviews a lot of people for the JFK assassination that you've never seen their interviews before. It's utterly phenomenal. But here's what they think happened. There was a guard behind RFK that just so happened to have the exact same gun that Sirhan was given. He had the access to the right ear of RFK. We believe that a security guard shot RFK right behind his right ear, because it definitely could not have been Sirhan. It just can't. So I know what you're thinking. Oh, just a bunch of other hearsay. I love the official stories of the world because they always, predict the future and make my life better. This documentary interviews that cop, that kind of rent-a-cop. He's sitting on, I believe, like a picnic table out in the middle of the wilderness, right? And they're talking to him about this gun because he knows they got him. But he's also, I don't know, maybe has a 90 IQ, maybe. They say 90 is a low IQ that gets violent. Well, they ask him on this interview, they say, well, how is it that you had this gun? Where did you get this gun? Because it's not an issued gun. It was your personal gun, right? Yes, sir. They said, where'd you get it? He proceeds to tell a lie on camera. He goes, well, I bought it off a farmer. Because it's Texas, right? Oh, okay. So where's the gun now? Because we'd sure like to do some ballistics on the missile, or on the bullet in RFK's brain and your gun. Well, I gave it back to him. Didn't sell it back to him. Gave it back to him. And what are the odds that someone wants to sell a gun for 2 weeks? Which is what this guy claimed. If you've bought guns off people, they're selling it to you because they don't want it anymore. It wasn't a special gun. It wasn't a freaking musket. It wasn't a Civil War rifle. It wasn't a famous Derringer. So the whole thing's a lie, and this guy is telling it. So then they ask him on camera, did you kill RFK? Because people think you did. No, I didn't kill anybody. I didn't do anybody, right? And they then ask him a bunch of the other questions I just said, and then they loop back because a stupid person doesn't understand how you can cross-reference a person to tell a lie, right? And this guy definitely was an ignorant human being. And they said, well, did you like the Kennedys? And he proceeds to just roast the Kennedys. Talking about, what kind of assholes they are, blah, 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 and he's glad he's dead, da-da-da. Oh, okay. So you have motive. You have a weapon that you don't have in your possession anymore, which was within inches of RFK, just technically speaking, even if you're not accused of killing him. It just happens to match the exact model of Sirhan's weapon, right? So those are the details of the murder of RFK. But now let's go back to MK Ultra. When Sirhan, so the profile of Sirhan, his real life was that he was a single male. I think he was in his early 30s. I want to say he was Syrian, but I can't remember if that's true or not. But he lived alone with his mom, He lived with his mom, or he was taking care of his mother. His whole life was just basically going to work, going to school, taking care of his mom. And that was it. And he was definitely a mama's boy, and he was definitely a super soft-spoken, sweet person when he was talking. He wakes up in prison, and they interview him. And he says the exact same thing Jack Ruby says, that he cannot remember any of it. Now, we know from multiple eyewitness testimony that a girl in a polka dotted dress with the base color being black, as I understand it, comes screaming, hooray, hooray, at the back of this motel. Or hotel, whatever, right? So we know something's up. It's no mystery that John was killed, then Robert was killed, then Malcolm X was killed, then Martin Luther's killed. They were just on a killing spree, right? And let's not forget that I believe it's in 1972 when Nixon was about to lose re-election to a competitor. That guy was shot in the spine, just like Larry Flint. Larry Flint was shot. Within 4 months, you have two guys that shoot people saying they were doing it for their girlfriends, as if the script couldn't be rewritten in 4 months. One was John Lennon, who was actually gunned down and killed, and the other one was President Reagan, who had been investigating the Federal Reserve. Let's go back to Cathy O'Brien. Cathy O'Brien is inside the MK Ultra program. Her husband-to-be, I believe as the story goes, was assigned to protecting assets of MK Ultra. And I'm not sure exactly what that entails. I'm sure it's a bunch of undercover sort of work. You don't walk around with fatigues on or a police outfit on. You're an undercover agent for the intelligence agency. He said that he had fallen in love with her, which means he had to have had some level of proximity with her. Could have been love at first sight based on her appearance, could have been part of her soul that appealed to him. But he contacted a friend, as he tells the story in front of her. And their story is that he contacted a friend and found out what her control phrase was. The word that would get her to do anything that he said. And I guess she had some autonomy. When she wasn't inside the program, she was allowed to travel in and around the base a little bit. And I think the way the story goes is his buddy said that the control word is oddly your name, as pulled from the Bible, which is the name Mark. You know, I haven't heard this for about 5 years, so I'm going to recall this as best I can. But he said that he got her on the phone, and he told her to meet him at a local restaurant, which I think was a Wendy's or something like that. But it was a local restaurant, and he read a passage out of the book of Mark. And she ended up following the command and met him at this restaurant. He proceeded to abduct her and rescue her out of this program. And they went into hiding for some indeterminate amount of time, as he was then trying to get her to realize what had gone on. And by this late stage in her life, she has spent pretty much her entire adult life inside this program, being utterly raped by people I mentioned. She has very, very detailed stories about being raped by, this is just her claim, George Herbert Walker Bush and Senator Byrd. Senator Byrd being her main controller, and George Herbert Walker Bush being the one that would visit her from time to time. She talks about the fact that she said that while she was being raped by Mr. Bush, that he would constantly remind her during the process that there's nothing that she can do to escape this process, that if she told anyone, no one would believe her. Yeah, I'm just repeating what she said. But now one of the weird videos online that you're going to look up after I say it, because you're not going to believe it, and hopefully it's still out there. I can't believe I'm telling you hopefully it's out there, but is an interesting video where Mark, her husband, and her were traveling on camera, doing a documentary, and he's looking very nervous. He's looking in the rearview mirror constantly, and they are driving from wherever they were to a clinic because they are going to prove something about her story. Something I think that when you see it, you'll understand the level of torture and mutilation that she experienced. And until you see it, you can't believe it. I'm just going to tell you that right now. But they go to a clinic where she is, it's like an OBGYN, a gynecologist, vagina doctor for some of you. And they, she's been so tortured, and she is now okay. And she has all kinds of, she talks about this stuff in tons of videos online, right? Cathy O'Brien with a C. C-A-T-H-Y. They put her up in stirrups. And I believe this is 100% on YouTube still. And she spreads her legs and she says, look, I was tortured and mutilated by these people due to very precise satanic rituals. And she said they mutilated my vagina to look like a devil's face. Now, it's not like you open her legs and you automatically see the devil's face, okay? But what happens is, and this is just unbelievable that someone has mastered this technique to cut the vulva of flesh around a vagina to do this, right? But they simply, I think it was that she just reached down with her fingers and pulled back on her vagina. And unbelievably, you have a really long, devilish nose, what looks like eyes, which looks like a chin, all coming out of her flesh down there. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you start to understand the very depths of the evil of these people, right? So when she shows you something like that, and she's accusing these people that you can't believe would be a participant in this, it all starts to do a Luke, I'm your father moment, right? Where the entire story compresses into a block of truth. Now, the idea that she would somehow get herself mutilated to keep the story going is sort of ridiculous, right? I've said in an episode a long time ago, obviously there are women that have falsely accused men of rape and that sort of thing, but I think they're a lot more evident than the women that have really just said, look, like Bill Clinton's victims. Once a woman is raped and there becomes a public piece of knowledge, then she's damaged goods to all the men that would ever consider marrying that woman and having a family with her. And, to the women who've had to go through that, hats off. I hope that you're fully recovered and you realize that there's a lot of good men out there that don't care, right? They know that you've been victimized and, we're here for you sort of thing, right? It just doesn't matter. That's what I want you to know. So her story would be horrific to tell another human being, but luckily she found a man that fell in love with her and not only rehabilitated her out of the torture, but helped her get her message out in such a way that she can't be murdered now easily. Now, the sad part about the child that she said was stuck in the system is that she has no proof that she had the child. She was never allowed to visit her child. And I believe she said that, I think there's two things that were true about her child, which are just horrific when you really think it through. Someone impregnated her child, but her child actually died in the prison, I believe. I hope I'm wrong about that, but I think that was the final story of it all because they couldn't afford to let her out. So Cathy O'Brien has been out of this program for at least 2 decades now. And I'm not sure where she is today, but if you want to see some pretty amazing testimonies about MKUltra, boy, she'll take you on a journey that you may not be ready for, But now the real question about MKUltra was that well, for one thing, for anyone who doubts that this program actually existed, it is one of the only clandestine programs that actually had to settle lawsuits. So there are court cases where people have won against the United States government for having been victimized by MKUltra. So it is in the books. It is in the annals of recorded history as having existed. So if you want to deny it existed, you'll lose that battle quite quickly. But now think about it. We've talked about mind control in the episode. And I'm just going to give you some interesting tchotchkes to walk away with, right? What they were doing was trying to figure out the fundamentals of the human mind. Again, I don't think anyone was trying to hide launch codes inside women for a real, purpose. What are they going to do? There's a nuclear war and they're going to rape a bunch of women to figure out what the codes are? That's just ridiculous. They were simply doing that as an experiment. But something Cathy said that I think that she hasn't continued to talk about, I don't know, is the idea that she said that her daughter was mainly tortured by sound waves and not by rape. And Cathy herself had experienced this as well. They transformed out of the liability of rape into a more scientific method. It'll make you look at Senator Byrd a whole different way after you see Cathy O'Brien's testimonies, as well as President Bush Sr. But now they figured out that sound waves can neutralize the mind in a way that it's susceptible to programming. And I'm going to give you a really simple one. A really simple one, a little piece of homework. The homework is this. If you have a bathroom with a fan in it, I want you to study your brain before you turn the fan on, and I want you to study your brain after you turn it on. I want you to, especially if it's loud, or if it's a quiet fan, you're probably not going to experience this too much. But when you have that fan by you, it's very different than a house fan, because the fan inside of a bathroom is small, and it's trying to overachieve constantly, right? Because it's got a little tiny pipe. It's trying to suck the air out of the bathroom, all the moisture to go up to a little pipe out the top of your roof, right? Now, I think you will find it very difficult to have complex thoughts while this fan is on in your bathroom. And let it fester for a minute or two, because most of us take more than that to dry off and to get the bathroom all situated, finish up your ritual. But now I want you to study when you turn the fan off. Study how it's almost like your blood supply with your thought process rejoins your frontal lobes. It's an amazing thing. I feel it every time I turn my fan on. I realize that when I turn my fan on, I am losing connection with my mind. It's really strange. The other experiment you can do that we talk about is fluorescent lights. Fluorescent lights are obviously 50% on, 50% off, and a 60th of a second flicker. Same with televisions, right? Whether they be tube televisions or LED televisions, right? They're flickering. LEDs use something called pulse width modulation to flicker. Your power company obviously can control some of the frequencies of some of the lights in your house. But when you turn on a fluorescent light in your house, pay attention to how well you can think. And then turn it off and study your brain pattern. For those of you who work in an office in which you cannot escape fluorescent lights, you are being turned into sort of a programmy drone, a reptilian drone while you're at work. And the second you leave and go out in the sunlight, you feel a lot better, right? When the power goes out at your work, everyone feels an amazing relief when darkness hits the room. And what's interesting is I've said in previous episodes, I've taught people this by being in a room and turning the lights out and saying, can you feel that, right? But now, what's the fundamentals of what I'm talking about? The fundamentals of what I'm talking about has to do with trauma. Reprogramming the state of the mind into a frequency of suggestibility by very acute moments like torture or sound wave bombardment, right? Or perhaps light bombardment. Now, I want you to think about everything I've talked to you guys about in previous episodes about mind control, how shocking the mind with light and sound creates a stun in your system, how watching news about 9/11 stuns your system when it's brand new, and how susceptible you are to programming during these moments of trauma. I want you to think about the cell phone towers that are all around our world, right? Broadcasting they essentially have the frequencies within their command to talk to the human mind through the skull. Again, just look up cell phone tower mind control. If you think that's crazy, you're going to find a lot of very validated institutions that have done this research, not conspiracy people. You know, I think Australia, if one, was one of the greatest sources. Some university down there actually warned the world and said, look, you got to be careful turning this stuff on. This is got the spectrum of the human mind in it. They may not choose to transfer telephone calls and messages within that spectrum, but it's definitely within its makeup. Now, if you go look up mind control, maybe CIA on YouTube, you will find videos with testimonies from validated, meaning people with credentials that have worked inside these intelligence agencies, telling you that by the mid-90s, pretty much mind control through radio frequencies was completely figured out. No longer is it a maybe, it's a potential. Meaning they can do it if they want to. We have something called HAARP in the world, HAARP. Big Tesla patent that's been misused. It was patented by a guy named Bernard Easton in the late 50s on behalf of the Air Force. I've talked about it several times. Many of you have heard about it. It has patents for creating earthquakes, for doing communication all over the world, for broadcasting amazing amounts of energy against the ionosphere that then reflects back down on the Earth. Weather control is part of their patent. But just like a normal cell phone tower, way before cell phone towers ever existed en masse, HAARP was out there in Alaska. They built several from what I understand. But it's fully capable of creating a message, creating a feeling, an obtuse feeling, most likely, happiness, panic, either making you docile and happy towards in a moment of stress. Right, so say the whole world's going into panic and a revolution's occurring worldwide, they can turn these antennas on and calm regions down, meaning you won't revolt. You feel comfortable. Who knows if they can do it to the extent of like morphine or something, or fentanyl or something, but my money's on the bet that they can. But they could also cause the panic. which I can't imagine them wanting to do for any reason because you lose control of people when you panic. But who knows what their plan might be. If they want to program a region of the world and they're going to create some sort of 9/11 in New York City, but they want LA to panic at certain intervals in the day, such that when the press comes out and tells you who done it, which means if you're fully traumatized, you're going to just swallow that without question. These devices can be coordinated to make that occur. So I would suggest to you, this is just a hunch, that MK Ultra nowadays is nothing more than the foundational steps to master mind control through much more advanced means today. Now again, like I said in the mind control episode, simply repeating bullshit constantly makes people believe things, right? That's how climate change has been able to grow as a virus into people that can't find all 50 states on a map, right? They know nothing about CO2 levels in the greenhouse gas layer. None. They don't know what the percentages are. So go look up Cathy O'Brien if you really have interest in this. I'm going to tell you that if you haven't already been sort of nauseated at times during this episode, listening to her will test that fabric inside your soul, depending on what kind of person you are. If you made it to the end of this, you're probably a person who can listen to it. But it's very extensive. It's extremely real. It's been proven in a court of law to have existed and harmed people as a result of the rewards given to individuals. And I'm sure that only a fraction of people actually got money for it. Yes, drugs were administered during these processes to see if it could augment the absorption of the trauma. I'm not sure what those drugs are, so I'm not going to get into it. I do not believe that LSD was necessarily a big part of it, but it did. LSD was invented in the mid-30s, okay? It wasn't something invented during the 60s, and it was a government-created drug. And for those of you who think you can have a really, traumatizing forever experience on LSD, you have to look up the scientist that invented it. One of the guys who I think invented it spilled a whole beaker on his hand and went on a trip for a really long time, but he came back just fine and lived the full remainder of his life without any problems. There's a gentleman that took a lot of LSD and was very famous for it. There's a bunch of them that are famous for it, but Timothy Leary was probably the most famous name associated with taking LSD in the 60s and early 70s. I've actually had friends that dropped acid with him. That's another guy that had taken massive amounts at a time. And again, once you take it, you've sort of gone to the museum of who you are, and you would have to probably travel a decade forward and change who you are to have a different experience. So it's not something that can be abused. It just can't, right? But I do believe it loosened up the mind and perception to take in more information, but I can't imagine being tortured on LSD because you would see all the dimensions of someone's soul while they're doing it to you, and that would be very disturbing because you would understand it on a full three-dimensional level, right? But MK Ultra is just it's the foundation of mind control. That's all you need to know. If you're interested, go look it up. But I think that's about all I got for you on that subject in terms of just the low-hanging fruit that would fit in with an hour or so. So go take a look on YouTube. Go take a look on the internets and see what you can find. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. If you haven't been to mkultraradio.com, that's the link for all the stuff that we have, all the past shows. Video people, you can get it on podcast. Podcast people, you can get it on video. If your podcast reader doesn't go back far enough, you can use the website to download the episodes into your podcast reader and have fun there. I guess we're just going to keep going past 100 here. I think that's all I got for you folks on this particular episode. As I always say, take care of yourself and someone else, and I will see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.